A word about Keep It Green. We started as a resistance organization to keep environmental degradation under control in Greene County. So we started as a resistance, but we're also partially,
That'd probably be better.
yeah.
You're not well done.
Yeah.
We're also interested in promoting environmental, sustainably developmental activities that will bring economic activity to Greene County so that we're better able to resist the projects that are environmentally questionable that would lead to degradation of our environment. So we have a double mission. My mission today is to acquaint you with some of the larger issues that are in play throughout the Hudson Valley, of which the projects in Greene County at Catskill and Athens are just one moving part of a rather more complex scenario which is in play, and it's in play fairly recently for reasons I'll get to. The issue is what threatens our greenness here in Greene County. There's three important lines to the story with the blue stars. One is that there's a large amount of waste that's generated in the city and throughout the Hudson Valley that needs someplace to go. The second element of the story is that barging is a lot cheaper than trucking to move large quantities and tonnages of materials about. The third element of this story is there's a bunch of quarries along the river, which are big holes in the ground, many of which are played out, some of which are still active. And the idle and empty parts are simply awaiting some new purposing. So the question is, do these three stars add up to a narrative? An example of a narrative might be, ooh, let's put a lot of our garbage in these big holes in the ground and move it by barge. Simple narrative, I'm sure you can understand it, and it's very appealing at some level. The question is, do we in Greene County want to be part of the narrative or not? And it's my job today to acquaint you with some of the issues and some of the good parts and the bad parts of the potential stories that might play out in order to divert those waste streams into some place which is environmentally acceptable. I would hope very much that we could agree at the start as a ground rule that we're not open for just taking anybody's garbage. But there are other waste streams that might be, under some circumstances, attractive, and the particular one that's in play now is the construction and demolition, C&D, so to speak, that is flooding the market and needs some place to go. Do we want to be part of that? Well, we'll see. I hope to inform you today of what the issues and the choices are so that you can make an informed decision about what you guys want to do. I come from the bright lights and glitter of Catskill. You folks in Athens have to make your own choices. You don't want to make the mistake of our neighbor up the river, Rensselaer, New York, who were invaded and taken over by a landfill. They had the wisdom to co-locate it next to the high school so that the students of the high school could learn up close and personal what happens when local elected leaders make a real mistake and allow something like this to go forward. So I think it would be important that we keep as our ground rule that we're not going to become South Rensselaer or the dumpster of the Hudson Valley. I hope we can agree on that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Good. The narrative that I sort of outlined for you as, oh, here's a big hole in the ground, let's put our C&D waste in there, is playing out now in Rockland County to the south of us. There's a giant hole in the ground that used to be the Tilcon quarry from which aggregate was pulled for many, many years, but they're not doing that anymore, and it's sitting there idle filling up with water. There's a barge terminal, there it is there, so that part of the story is in play. And the appealing story of let's fill our hole up with something that's environmentally not too objectionable is playing out with Tilcon turning over the operation of filling the hole up to a small shell company, Hudson River Resources, that is interested in taking on the job and has put in a proposal to the town of Tompkins Cove to go forward with this. I'm not quite sure exactly where that stands at the moment, but we'll be watching that with some interest, and I know the Riverkeeper has in fact also weighed in, as this is perhaps not something that Rockland County wants to take on. There's an interesting theme here that Hudson River Resources, as I say, it's a shell company that does land reclamation and so forth. They label themselves as a resource company, not, you know, we're not a barge company, we're not a land reclamation company, we're a resource company, as if that were a green label that would help you swallow any of the questionable things they might be bringing to you. It's sort of, you know, calling themselves a resource company is like taking a hitman and relabeling him as a human resources consultant. It doesn't play well. So here's the one of the quarries that I'm telling you about that's in play now. There's one up south of Poughkeepsie at Crown Heights, which is not in play now that I'm aware of, but who knows. It has its barge terminal onto the river, but since it's still active, maybe they don't want to fill up the hole until they take all the stuff out of it yet. On the other hand, if you're a barge company and you got a load of C&D that you're taking north up to Crown Heights, you might want to think about what you're going to take coming back. And so if you take the C&D to Crown Heights, maybe you could take the aggregate back to the city. And if you have a two-way run, you make out like a bandit compared to taking your barge back empty. And so one of the material firms that is supplying the C&D to the Peckham project, which I'll tell you about later, that's Inwood. Inwood is in fact also a barge company, and it's also co-located with Nassau Ready Mix Concrete at the same site. And so for a company like that, it's a no-brainer. Hey, I take the C&D up to a working quarry, I get aggregate, and I bring it back for my concrete operation. So although I'm not aware that this quarry is in play now, watch out. There's a big wet hole in the ground on the Rondout, just near Kingston at Connolly. That one could be in play. Got a barge terminal right there, right out to the Hudson, straight shot. East Kingston has working quarries, which would potentially be in play down the road as a two-way operation. Aggregate south, C&D waste north. Beware. And then, of course, are the big quarries up north of us at the north end of the Helderberg Escarpment at South Bethlehem and Ravenna. They're co-located with the Lafarge cement operation, which is, well, you can see it where it is in this picture, and they're right near the Queemans Marine Terminal, which has barge stuff. And it also has, here's a blow-up of this area here. The barge terminal has a conveyor belt that runs up to the cement plant, so that the two-way traffic of cement coming down the conveyor, you know, at night they'll run the C&D waste up where they can put it in parts of the quarry that aren't being used. So there's another potential player in this story. What about Greene County? That's what we care about, and that's what we're meeting here today to think about. By far the largest complex of quarries in the Hudson Valley are those that are in the cement belt south of Catskill. There's a huge complex that you may not even know about because it's invisible inside a hollowed hill to the west of the Helderberg Escarpment. That's, think, the cliff that's along 9W to the west of it. Here it is from the air in a Google image, and you can see that the scars in the inside of that hillside west of 9W are this enormous quarry complex. The Peckham organization has some asphalt plants and crusher operations there, and the south part, it's cement, and there's a different company, that's Lehigh Cement, and their quarries I don't believe are very active at the moment, but they sure are big ugly holes in the ground. I think they're just grinding clinker there rather than actually producing cement anymore. So there's a lot of real estate that is, how should we say, prime target for filling up in this rather simple-minded narrative that I spun for you. Barge, hole, waste, you know, put them all together and you get a particular picture. So we have a waste stream for sure. We have this huge complex of quarries. There are over 2 square miles of potential holes in the ground that could be filled in with anything really. Some of the local landmarks include Inbach Bay, Duck Cove, the Hudson River, of course. Cementon's down here, so Catskill is up there to the north. This area, marked the Holsom site, is the site of a former, first it was St. Lawrence and then it was Holsom. That plant has been shut down and demolished and taken away. But they did have a barge terminal that ran off of this causeway out into the deep parts of the river for the delivery of cement to the market in the metropolitan region downriver. Here's the asphalt plant, and I'm going to show you next a view that's taken from the air across the lower parts of these quarries, across the Holsom cement site, the former cement plant, across Inbach Bay and out into the river. Because it turns out that the interesting part of the story for us has to do with the Peckham takeover of the Holsom site and the quarries that were associated with it. So in August of 2016, an application showed up at the DEC. And it was for a project that had to do with filling this gigantic hole. This is just one of the holes going up here. Here's the cement plant, here's the asphalt plant and its crusher, and you can see a big plume of dust rising off it, just so that you know where it's located. Over here is the site of the former Holsom cement plant and this cloth building we'll see in subsequent views of this area. And this unnaturally green astroturf covered mound is in fact the old ash dump from the Holsom cement kiln operation that, you know, spewed out coal ash for, 100 years or whatever length of time. Holsom and Lafarge and their predecessors before them dump ash. And by the way, the whole area here up and down the cement belt has these ash dumps associated with them. Now, the story that I'm going to tell you is actually a little bit different from what goes on in Tompkins Cove, because the proposal of which this picture was the cover page that went to the DEC was a little bit different from the C&D dump it in the hole. What they wanted to do was put a lot of toxic ash that was generated by a series of toxic ash incinerators throughout the Hudson Valley that Wheelabrator operated for Peekskill, for Poughkeepsie, for Hudson Falls, and so forth. So we have an empty quarry, check. We have a waste stream, we have that for sure, but it isn't C&D debris this time. It's toxic incinerator ash. And we do have a barge dock, but we only have that since Peckham took over the Holsom site, including the causeway and the barge terminal at the end of it, on either side of Inbach Bay and Duck Cove. So the three red checks I said have the same elements that we looked at before, but they're different. But there was a closely held parallel project, which we didn't find out about until 4 months ago, which actually closed the loop and makes the story quite similar to the other ones which are in play. How'd the Wheelabrator proposal work out? Well, actually, it didn't play very well in the community. It had been on the table for 3 years, and it wasn't public knowledge until the spring of 2019. At which point Keep It Green sort of sat back, and I, as a geologist, found it such an offensive proposal from a geological point of view, not to mention its environmental disastrous fallout, that we formed and we made, shall we say, the public aware that there were problems with this proposal. It had serious consequences for the locale. Oh, I'm asked to get closer. When I did that, I sometimes hear some feedback.
Just talk louder.
Advice?
There is feedback.
You're just not microgenic.
I'll shrink, and that way I'll get some. So, what happened was that the publicity that was generated made the Wheelabrator proposal extremely distasteful to the Australian bank, which was in the process.
It's coming, they're working.
that was now taking over Wheelabrator. And so Wheelabrator withdrew their application in the spring of 2019 rather than face a full DEC review after the deficiencies of their proposal had been pointed out in some detail. I said there was a closely held project that is a parallel story to the Wheelabrator thing. This is the title page from an application for a permit, a Part 360, you heard about Part 360 from Paul, for a visual noise and dust screening berm along Route 9W in Catskill. Here's a working drawing of the berm, so to speak, and you can see that it was prepared in the working drawing, never mind the plan. The plan must have predated this working drawing for a long time. And this precedes by a whole year the submittal of the proposal to the DEC or public or even, I believe, planning board awareness of this. Well, maybe the planning board knew, I don't know. But the public awareness of this proposal was a year behind them having these drawings that went into the proposal. There's the berm outlined in orange, and you say, what on earth is that doing there? What's the point of this berm? So here's the view from Germantown last fall, and you can see the cloth building. So I told you in the picture where the cloth, I showed it to you, and here it is on the map. And the view from Germantown shows you clearly where the cloth building is, as well as showing to the right of it the AstroTurf green mound of coal ash in their dump. So the proposal was to essentially, oops, there we go. There's the berm in PowerPoint. It isn't built yet, but they would like to put a berm. Maybe they'll choose a more attractive color, I'm not sure, and put it there to hide an existing asphalt plant that's going to be expanded behind the berm, and the public will be protected from having to see the ugliness of this project by having this berm in place. One aspect of this proposal, which is emphasized quite forcefully, is that the C&D material is clean rhucarbs, and I'll tell you what rhucarbs are quite shortly. But the purpose of the berm is to hide some asphalt plant which they're going to expand into the space that's hidden behind the berm. So, yeah, it was planned for quite a while before it went to the DEC. So, what are the issues with the berm that they're proposing that raise environmental interest? Well, it's clearly a barely disguised unlined landfill, and it's got leachate problems. This was quite obvious to the DEC when they reviewed the project, and they said, you know, you have to go the landfill route rather than try and put this off as a construction project. The material that was to fill the berm and make the bulk of the construction was this stuff, rhucarbs, which is recognizable, uncontaminated concrete, asphalt, brick, rock, soil. And that's fine, they're passing it off as clean, but the issue is when you read the fine print in the proposal, is that this stuff is allowed to have 4% of other material besides just old bricks and asphalt. And so if you do the math, on a 600,000 ton berm, which is the mass that they're proposing to dump there, you have 4% of others, you could have 24,000 tons, not pounds, tons of toxin in the mix, and that would be perfectly acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable, maybe you don't either, but according to Peckham it is, and there wasn't any leachate testing specified to, in fact, get some handle on whether nasty things were coming out of this big pile of stuff or not. The idea that you have clean C&D is an oxymoron, as Paul just told you, and I'm just repeating what he told you previously. And if this is such great stuff at 4%, you might want to ask yourself why the Tompkins Cove project is weighing it at, oh, we can get stuff that's only 1% other material. Are we getting the crap end of the pile and Rockland County gets first choice? I think this is not a good way to be doing business. Let's look at the rhubarb material. There it is. It's right out of the Peckham proposal. And you can see it is, you know, it's granulated, crushed up concrete, asphalt, whatever. Let's hope that those rather unnatural blue stains on the concrete have nothing toxic and leachable in them. But, you know, passing quickly over that, I would ask you to consider whether visual inspection, which is the principal tool that Peckham is proposing to keep nasty stuff out of the stream, would be able to spot a barrel of DTT dumped into this big pile of sand, gravel, and crunched up asphalt. Toxic cocktailing is a very common problem with C&D materials. And I'm not just making this stuff up. When the DEC sent a SWAT team into Corollas' dump last summer down in Saugerties, the first thing they found when they tested was it was laced with DDT. I mean, where did they get this stuff? We haven't made it for decades, and yet it's showing up in these landfills as a clear and present danger to the health of anybody who lives down leachate path or down drainage from something like that. So it's not clear to me that a 4% standard of other and the possibility of somebody tipping a barrel of DDT off of the skyway over the Hudson as the barge is coming up from Brooklyn is something you want in your environmental future. The way you keep that stuff out is to test for it chemically at the point of delivery and the point of receipt. Supposedly, when it leaves Brooklyn or Nassau County, it will be tested. But Peckham is only proposing to test one barge in 10 chemically to see if there's stuff in it that you might not want. That's clearly unacceptable. And somebody other than Peckham ought to be in charge of doing the testing, and they ought to be randomizing and not a 1 in 10 formula. It's crazy. There are more issues with the berm, and who needs it anyway? And why do you want to hide an asphalt plant? Peckham has 2 asphalt plants here in Athens, and do either of them have berms on them? I don't think so. And so it's not clear that the standard for visual excellence is that you put a berm around your asphalt plant. The DEC told them that they liked the view as it was, thank you very much, and your proposal to put up a berm is superfluous, as well as, you know, it's a complete speculation of why that would be a good thing to do. And what asphalt plant is it that they wanted to hide anyway? You know, remember, you can't see the asphalt plant now because it's up in the quarry. And the quarry is a very good visual, sound, and dust shield. There's a big plume of dust coming up from the crusher when that's in operation. But otherwise, most people don't know what an enormous quarry there is up there behind the hill on the west side of 9W. If they wanted to expand their existing asphalt plant, they got 2 square miles of quarry that they can expand into, and nobody's going to be bent out of shape by them doing that. But I think that the reason is that they wanted to move the asphalt plant is because they were about to run 11,000 trucks a year, big 18-wheelers of ash up that access road through the asphalt plant and to the quarry where they were going to make that huge ash dump. And so I think it was something they thought, oh wait, we're going to mess up our quarry by having all these big trucks come in, driving right through our asphalt plant. We won't be able to get the asphalt trucks in and out through the traffic that the ash dump is going to be generated. So from that point of view, it made perfect sense to move the asphalt plant down to the river, build a berm around it, case closed. But the problem with bringing in C&D waste to the end of the barge terminal and driving it along the causeway is that you're going to generate dust, taking the stuff off of the barges, moving it along the trucks, dumping it on the berm. And you're right in the middle of Inbach Bay to the north and Duck Cove to the south, which the Department of State of the New York establishment rates as the best and the most important bass nursery on the Hudson. Freshwater tidal wetlands are in some jeopardy worldwide, and our biggest and best one is this complex in Bach Bay and Duck Cove, where a lot of our bass fishery originates, at least the nursery part of it. I don't think you go in amongst the plants and the duckweed to catch them. I think you do that out somewhere else. So the fact that they hadn't even considered that as a possible problem, among other things, led the DEC to give them a notice of incomplete application, which if you if you decode that, that's a no thank you very much, go back to the drawing boards. They also the DEC also faulted the Peckham proposal because they didn't realize that this was an environmental justice area. So what happened, they sent them back to the drawing boards on December 4th, and maybe Peckham is redrafting their plans even now, we don't know. But why would they do that? It wasn't really about hiding the asphalt plant. They don't hide the asphalt plants up here in Athens. And now, when there's no ash dump anymore, there's no reason to move the plant, so the hidden rationale for doing so is gone. So I think we really have to look for another reason why they might have been interested in building this berm in the first place. Well, one reason might be that they're going to get tipping fees from Inwood and Alico for taking on this material that they can't get rid of otherwise unless they have some place to put it. I've done, a crude calculation, and I think that, they might clear $1 million or $2 million a year in doing this project. In other words, it wouldn't cost them to build the project. They'd actually get a little bit of money. That's not even enough to pay the bond on our new jail, but we're not getting the money anyway. The corporate office in White Plains is getting it. It's not even coming into this county. Another possible incentive for building this berm is that it's sort of, nuzzled up to and surrounding the old, it's nuzzled up to the AstroTurf mound of coal ash, and it's also surrounding the site of the old cement plant. There might be some liability and legacy toxicity from that 100-year industrial operation. And one thing the DEC faulted them for in their proposal, there isn't any toxic review of the area that is in play for this particular project. Who knows what would happen if they cored the area and looked at the stuff that was under where the cement plant is, and what on earth is coming out of that coal ash dump that we don't know about. So that's a possible strategy, that the berm is in fact burying some old liability. But I think that what we have to worry about is this is simply a wedge strategy to introduce C&D into Greene County. It comes in, informally in road trucks sometimes. Just think Corollas down in Saugerties, that goes on here too. But this is barge loads of the stuff, not the odd dump truck here and there.
Sir,
Yes.
you have to speak louder. You hear me, I can't hear you.
I can, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I'm so challenged in working with electronic audio systems. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not hearing the feedback either. So thank you, Rebecca, for tuning the business right. We're here to talk about Athens, aren't we? And I haven't gotten to Athens yet because I was sort of setting the stage for where Athens fits into this much larger picture of a Hudson Valley waste stream, a bunch of barges and big holes in the ground. Athens doesn't have a big hole in the ground to put this stuff in. So the other parts of the story, the barge terminal and a waste stream, it does have. And sure enough, right on cue, as soon as we're looking at the Wheelabrator withdrawing, out of the ether pops Athens Steve Doring Environmental Development, LLC, with the proposal to put a C&D processing facility, I emphasize processing facility, here in Athens. A couple of things to note. Note the environmental development wrapper on a shell company. Athens Steve Doring didn't even exist a year ago. It was formed simply to do this project. An LLC means you can't bite them in court, or at least not as hard if they weren't an LLC company. C&D, self-explanatory. Processing needs some explanation. I'll get to that shortly. Where is this proposed site? It's up on North Washington Street, right south of the boat launch on the Murdner Kill, which I've indicated with a white arrow there. So their proposal, this page is, a picture is taken out of their proposal that went to the DEC last fall, shows the site at 133 North Washington, where they're proposing to bring barges to the site, unload C&D material and process it, and put it in separate piles for asphalt here, concrete over there, and so on and so forth. This is an archival picture of this 16 years ago, when it was still a small tank farm and barge unloading point for hydrocarbons. I believe Peckham had something to do with this. Now, the issue is processing. What is processing of C&D? One end member is you take it out of the barge, you put it in a truck and send it somewhere else. That's the simplest. On the other hand, processing might well involve crushing the stuff, screening it, and sorting it. And here's an example of what an operation for those processes looks like. There's a lot of dust. There's a lot of noise. And the character of your village would change substantially if you had a crusher at the end of North Washington Street. You wouldn't be able to hear yourself think in the Stewart House when you're enjoying a fine beverage on the premises where this crusher was going. The Tompkins Cove crusher makes a noise problem 2 miles away. So I have to tell you that this is not something that is going to keep the character of the village the same if you wind up with a crushing, screening, and sorting facility. It's obvious that crushing and sorting produce a lot of dust. Remember that dust plume I showed you over the asphalt plant up in the quarry when I showed you the front page of the Wheelabrator thing? Imagine that in your town. You're going to have a lot of dirty laundry when you bring it in from the drying line. So, the dust would also impact the Wellsburg Swamp and the Middle Ground Flats, which are apparently more important for shad than they are for bass. But in fact, I gather there's some bass activity there. That's not going to be a good thing for the protected environments that we're dealing with locally. And of course, unloading the barges, never mind processing the stuff, unloading the barges and loading the trucks makes some debris, dust as well. And so are they going to construct a gantry? Or are they going to use a conveyor? Are they going to just do with an excavator a load at a time? The flux of material that they're proposing to bring in, not store, and then move out by truck is so large that one 18-wheeler would have to back into the site, get loaded up, and then be dispatched every 20 minutes throughout a 12-hour day, 6 days a week. That's a lot of traffic. And you're going to have 11,000 18-wheeler dump trucks in your village for the foreseeable future if this proposal is allowed to go forward in its present form. Are you ready for that much traffic?
No way.
Oh, well, you do have definite opinions. I'm glad to hear it. You know, why can't they send this stuff to Albany or Queens, where they're set up to do this kind of transfer, for heaven's sakes? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why Athens, a pokey little terminal that's 6 acres, when they got, you know, enormous areas which do this already up in Queens and up in Albany? It's not there. For those of you who have been paying close attention, the number 11,000 18-wheelers came up both in the Wheelabrator proposal, that's how many ash trucks were coming into Catskill, and it's also the same number of trucks that would be taking C&D out of Catskill. That is a weird numerical coincidence, don't you think? I gave an interview on WGXC on Friday, and I didn't know why that coincidence was in play. It didn't make any sense to me then. But then I read the rules on the DEC's regulatory limits for various loads of material and types of operations that were allowed. And so this turns out that this number of 11,000 truckloads is not a coincidence. That works out, they quote these numbers in very different ways in the two proposals, but if you do the math, they both clock in at 500 tons a day, only just a little bit south of 500 tons a day. And amazingly enough, the other shoe dropped when I read the DEC regulations. There's a threshold at 500 tons a day. If you exceed that, then you're in a whole nother level of scrutiny of your proposal, and the permitting gets really, really icky. It's icky now, but it's even ickier if you're above 500 tons. So I think that this 500 ton a day limit is something to do with the coincidence that both want to run 11,000 trucks a year through each of these proposals. What you have to know, though, is whether the fluxes, which are enormous, are limited by those DEC constraints. If the Trump administration rolls back those protections, would they have 20,000 trucks a day that they could send you? That's one possibility. The other possibility is that those 11,000 trucks a year are in fact an aspirational goal, as we dream of sending you 11,000 trucks a year. You don't know which it is yet. The proposal is too sketchy to know whether they really have that flux of material or whether they're banking on, a really good run of getting there. And in order for you to evaluate this proposal in a way that's important, you have to know the answer to that question. There are other things that you need to know. You need to know what your zoning and regulatory tools are, and whether you have plans in place to deal with this sort of a project when it or not is proposed. And I'm hoping that the mayor will have some things to say about that. Another thing that you have to know the answer to is, does the Steve Doring project in fact fit what plan there might be for the development of Athens or not? You don't know anything about their track record because they're an LLC company that was formed as a shell less than a year ago, and they have no track record. So you have to background check who's involved, whether they have a good record of actually doing this stuff on a consistent basis, and show good environmental stewardship. I think you also have to recognize that this is quite closely linked to the Peckham thing, and we have to just consider what Peckham's record as an environmental steward is. They're the guys that brought us Wheelabrator. They're the guys that were sued for abusing their permit at the Pike Road quarry, 15 years ago. And at the very least, you need to have a full environmental impact statement and a full SECR review. That's State Environmental Quality Review, for those of you who don't know what SECR is. And the guy you call and tell him that's what you want is Patrick Connolly up at DEC Region 4 headquarters. Here's his phone number. There's his email if you prefer the email approach. But if you have strong opinions on this, this is the guy to let know.
Can you read out the number?
The phone number is 518-357-2455. And the email is patrickconnolly@decnewyork.gov. I hope I've alerted you to important decisions that are coming in your future, because you do have choices to make here. You have elected officials who can help you make those choices in an informed manner. But unless you're informed, unless you stay engaged, you're not going to make the right choice. I hope you make them wisely. It's your future. I wish you very good luck with it. In the registration for the Steve Doring filing was a section on a surety bond calculation. If the project went south or folded or was completed for any reason, and they left big piles of junk at their site, they have to do a surety bond calculation for what's going to happen to clean it up when the show is over. They proposed to take leftover piles up to the Colony landfill in Cohoes, and there was a, you know, like, here's how much the tipping fee is, here's what it costs to truck this stuff up, and so on. I'm here today as a member of Keep It Green to suggest to you that instead of sending the leftover piles to the landfill, you ought to send that proposal right to the landfill now.